Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for tuning in. So today I'm going to teach you about concepts, constructs and variables. But most importantly, the types of variables: independent, dependent, extraneous, intervening, moderating. But before I begin the class, I would like you to please hit that subscribe button if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet. And also, it is my kind request to you all to please tap that like button if you like my videos. It means a lot. And also, it helps my videos to reach out to many more students like yourselves who are preparing for this exam. Okay then, let us start the class now. Concepts. So, concept is a very common word that we come across very often, but have you ever wondered what a concept really means? So in simple terms, it is classifying or categorizing events according to that have common characteristics. So when you're able to categorize things, when you're able to form categories of things according to their similarities or according to the common characteristics that you see in them, that is what we mean by concept. So I'll give you an example. Let us say I throw at you names of random plants. Okay, plants. Just a simple example. So after going through the names of the plants, you're able to classify them according to plants that bear flowers and plants that do not bear flowers. So you're categorizing them. You're forming categories of plants, right? So when you're able to do that, that is what we mean by concepts. Okay, I think you got it. A concept is a generally accepted collection of meanings or characteristics associated with certain events, objects, conditions, situations, and behaviors. So you'll be able to understand this definition with the help of an example. So let us say I present to you the concept of a rock band. So what are the things that come to your head when I say the word rock band? Can you tell me some characteristics associated with rock band? For me, I have picked some characteristics that I identify rock band with. Okay? So immediately in my head, 5 members come into the picture. Then I see the vocalist next. And after that, the guitarist and the other instrumentalists. And then when I say rock band, I picture them belting out rock and roll songs. And then them going on tours and concerts with screaming fans, and then the members of the band, they have cool attitude and cool hairstyles. So this is what we mean by characteristics associated with. Okay, so these are the characteristics associated with a certain event. Okay, so this is, in our case, rock band. So this is the most basic explanation of what concepts really mean. So we make use of concepts in research, but what are their roles? Why do we use concepts in research? Because the success of research depends on what? Research depends on how clearly we conceptualize. That means how clearly you're able to specify exactly what you mean by a term. So let us give an example. In my research, I use the term education. Okay? So it is your duty, it is your job as the researcher to clearly specify, what do you mean by education? Do you mean formal education? Do you mean non-formal education? So that is an example. Next is how well others understand the concepts that we use. So whatever concepts that you use in your research, they should be well understood by the person reading the research, reading the paper. Okay, so it should be comprehensible. It shouldn't be complex. It shouldn't be that complicated of a term. Okay? So, how well others understand the concepts that we use or develop is extremely important for the success of research. Concepts have progressive levels of abstraction. The degree to which the concept does or does not have something objective to refer to. So what do you mean by abstract? They're ideas. Like they're not in physical form. They cannot be touched. They can only be thought of. Okay, so they're in thought form, not physical form. I think you already get what I mean. I'll give you an example. So there are concrete or objective concepts like table, pen, cat, lamp. Okay, so these are examples of some objective concepts or concrete concepts. But when we talk of abstract concepts like personality or love or maybe intelligence, okay, they are much more difficult to visualize and you cannot definitely touch them. They do not have any physical form. So that is what we mean by constructs. Constructs are nothing but abstract concepts in the most simplest words. Constructs. So, what do you mean by a construct? It is an abstract idea. Abstract means something that cannot be touched. It doesn't have a physical form, okay? Inferred from specific instances that are thought to be related. Constructs exist in human brain and are not directly observable. So I'll explain this with the help of an example. You can tell that a person is smart. Oh yes, you can definitely tell that a person is smart. But how? By the way he carries himself. By the way he speaks or says something. By the way he addresses an issue with clarity and confidence, right? So you can say that that person is intelligent. So you come to the conclusion that this person has some signs of intelligence. So these are the collection of related events to this abstract concept or construct of intelligence. Intelligence exists in human brain and it is not directly observable. I think you get it now. So let us say you see someone who is anxious, but how are you able to tell that that person is anxious? Because he is trembling, he is sweating, he is restless, he is moving around here and there. So you see some signs of anxiety in this person, right? And anxiety is something that exists in human brain and is not directly observable. And what are the related events to anxiety? Trembling, sweating, being restless. Okay, so this is what we mean by constructs. Thus, constructs are complex and they are not that simple to define. They are complex. They are abstract concepts, not directly observable, but indirectly observable through a collection of related events. So, I think you are clear what concepts and constructs are so far. Now we'll move to the most important part of this class, variables. Variables are created by developing the construct into a measurable form. So, how do you define a variable? It is anything that has a quality, example curiosity, or a quantity, example temperature, that varies. That means it changes, okay? It's not fixed, it's not constant. It is always changing, it varies. It is the thing that we are trying to measure in some way. It tends to change or is subject to change, which is what we mean by varies. Okay? There are two very important variables in any research that you will encounter. Okay? One is independent, second is dependent. I'll start with dependent. Dependent variable or DV. It depends or relies on something to occur. So for it to occur, for it to happen, okay, it depends on something. What is it that dv depends on? It is independent variable, IV. So independent variable is the variable that is manipulated or controlled by the researcher to influence dv. It should be dv, I'm sorry, it's not IV. So IV influences dv, and dv depends on IV for it to occur. So IV is influencer and dv is outcome. IV is also the manipulator and dv is the resulting outcome, the result. So the meanings of IV and dv could be understood from the given examples. Exercise will cause you to lose weight. Here, exercise is the IV and losing weight is the dv. Likewise, how well you promote the ad of the product will impact the sale. Here, promotion of ad will be the IV and the sale is the dv. Next, the level of interest you have in a particular subject will affect the learning outcome. So the level of interest is obviously the IV and the learning process will be the dv. Too much soda drinks can lead to tooth decay. So here, soda drinks will be the IV and tooth decay will be the dv. Facebook is known to create anxiety amongst the teens. Facebook is the IV and anxiety is the dv. An employee's motivation is determined by the salary package. Here, the salary package will be the IV. Okay? Why? Because it is influencing the employee's motivation, which is the dv. A researcher conducts research of the impact of coaching institutes on students' performance in exams. So, the impact of coaching institute will be the IV and the student's performance will be the dv. So in the same way, I want you to come up with your own IV and dv of this sentence. Now let us look at the technical definition of independent variable. The variable that is stable and unaffected by the other variables. So that is why this variable is called independent, because it is stable and it is unaffected by other variables. It is presumed to influence other variables. So that is why it is also called presumed cause. That means its job is to influence other variables but itself. Okay? It refers to the condition of an experiment that is systematically manipulated by the researcher. So, independent variable is the variable that is systematically manipulated by the researcher. So it is the tool of the researcher only. So what the researcher will do in an experiment is it will manipulate or control the IV. Okay? Next, we have dependent variable, the variable that is expected to change. Remember, IV is the influencer and dependent variable is the outcome. Okay, just remember that. The variable that is expected to change as a result of the manipulation of the IV or other variables. Thus, it is a variable affected by independent variables. So, it's also called presumed effect. So, IV is the cause and dV is the effect. Okay. The dependent variable is the outcome that the researcher is interested in examining. So, in the experiment, the researcher is interested in studying dependent variable. and the researcher is interested in controlling the IV. Okay, so that is the difference. So independent variable is the cause and dependent variable is the effect. IV is explanatory and dependent. DV is the explained. IV is the stimulus and dependent variable is the response. IV is the predictor and DV is the predicand. So independent variable is also known as manipulated, experimental or treatment variable. So it's very important for you to remember these words because it could be asked in the exam. Dependent variable is also known as outcome or response variable. Now let's look at the next type of variable, extraneous variable. So all variables except the IV that could affect the results of the experiment but are not studied in the experiment. These variables are extras. So extraneous variables are the variables that we are not interested in studying. We are not interested in studying these variables because these are extras. Our main focus is the IV and DV, and extraneous variables just happen to be extras. That is how you will remember extraneous variables, okay? They are extras. They may or may not interfere in the experiment. So I'll give you a very common experiment. As you can see, this is the sunlight and there is clear blue sky and there is a plant in the pot. And here there is a plant in the pot and it is kept away from the sun. There's no sun, so maybe it's kept in a room or maybe under a box. So our experiment here is to see the effect of sunlight on the plant, the growth of the plant, right? So here in this experiment, IV is the amount of sunlight and DV will be the growth of the plant. The extraneous variables in this experiment are the size of the pot. Maybe it could affect the experiment, but we're not really focusing on the size of the pot, are we? So likewise, the climate, the soil type, the temperature, and the water. These are extraneous variables. When one of these extraneous variables happens to directly affect the DV and the results of the experiment. So when we find that one of these variables, one of these extras is found to directly affect the DV and it consequently affects the results, then we call that extraneous variable confounding variable. Confound means to confuse. Okay, so an extraneous variable becomes a confounding variable when that variable turns out to affect the DV and consequently the results of the experiment. So it's called a confounding variable because it confused or confounded the relationship we were originally interested in. Smoking causes cancer. Okay, so our IV will be smoking and DV will be the cancer. So let us name some extraneous variable. Okay, so I've called them EV, lifestyle, the UV rays of the sun, maybe the foods, genetic defects, or drugs. So one of these extraneous variables may or may not cause cancer, but the relationship that we are interested in studying is smoking with cancer. Okay, we're not interested in chemicals, lifestyle, UV rays, foods, and such. Okay, the relationship that we are interested in studying is smoking with cancer. So let us say, while we are doing the research, we find that genetic defect was really what caused the cancer and not smoking. So genetic defects will be the confounding variable. So am I clear? Extraneous variables are those variables that may or may not interfere in the experiment. We are not interested in studying them. They are the extras. Okay? And confounding is an extraneous variable that affects the DV and consequently the results of the experiment. In this case, the relationship that we are interested in studying is smoking with cancer. But as the research progresses, we find that genetic defects was really what caused the cancer, not smoking. So, the confounding variable is genetic defects because it is confusing our experiment. It is confusing the relationship that we were originally interested in studying. We are interested in the relationship between smoking and cancer, but one of the extraneous variables turns out to have an impact on the result of the study. That is, the cancer is caused by inherited DNA, not by smoking habit, as we had presumed at the start of the study. So this is what we mean by confounding variable. And now we're looking at the intervening variable, also known as mediating variable. It is a variable that explains the reason for the effect of IV on DV. It mediates between the two. That is, intervening variable will always lie between the IV and the DV. Keep that in mind, okay? So I'll give some examples and then only you'll be able to understand what intervening variables really are. Poverty leads to shorter lifespan. Poverty is the IV and shorter lifespan is the DV. Just because a person is poor, it doesn't mean he'll automatically die young. No, it doesn't happen like that. There is a reason. There is a reason why poverty leads to shorter lives. That answer to the question why, the reason that explains why poverty leads to shorter lifespan is our intervening variable. Poverty leads to a shorter lifespan. Maybe because of malnutrition, maybe because of lack of access to healthcare. Poverty doesn't directly lead to early death. No. Poverty, it causes malnutrition and it causes shorter lifespan. So, intervening variable is the reason. It is the reason for the effect of IV on DV. Have I made myself clear? Okay. Higher education leads to higher income. There is a reason why higher education leads to higher income. If you have a higher education degree, then it can fetch you a good job or a good occupation. Then it will lead to higher income. So that is what we mean by intervening. It mediates between the two. Next is interest in a subject leads to faster learning of that subject. Why? Because if you have interest, then you pay very good attention to it. You become very attentive to it. So, attention is our intervening variable. Exercise leads to weight loss. Exercise is the IV and weight loss is the DV. So, why would exercise lead to weight loss? Why? Because it burns the calories. Hence, exercise leads to weight loss. So, calories burn will be the intervening variable in this relationship. Okay? Thus, intervening or mediating variable helps explain the causal link or relationship between IV and DV. It answers the question why IV affects DV. I, which is intervening variable, will always lie between the two. It will explain why IV leads to DV. The reason IV affects DV is because IV affects I, which affects DV. Okay, I think you're seeing the pattern now. IV and DV have an implied relationship which exists because partly or fully because of I. So, the relationship between exercise and weight loss exists partly or fully because of calories burned. Okay? And lastly, we have the moderating variable or the moderator variable. So, it is always referred to as the third variable. Okay? So, It affects the strength of the relationship between the independent variable and the dependent variable. So the relationship between independent variable and the dependent variable, it will be affected by a moderating variable. Okay, so the job of a moderating variable is to either increase, decrease, or even reverse the relationship. Reverse, it means dependent variable can become independent variable depending on the moderating variable. So I'll cite some examples here. As I've already mentioned before, interest leads to fast learning. Interest is the IV, fast learning is the DV. So let us say you are studying in a very noisy environment, lots of distractions, disturbances. So that will definitely hamper the process of learning, right? It will weaken the relationship between IV and DV. So here in this case, disturbances will be the moderating variable. The next example is depression can lead to anxiety. Okay, so depression will be the IV and anxiety will be the DV. So let's say you have a very strong family support system, or maybe friend support system. If that is the case, then it will definitely weaken the relationship between these two. Stronger the family support system, weaker the relationship of depression and anxiety. Okay, so the chances of depression leading to anxiety in your life will be lesser. But unfortunately, if the support system in your life is weak, then it will strengthen the relationship between depression and anxiety. The weaker the support system, the stronger the chances of depression leading to anxiety. Okay. Next is social media affects an individual's self-esteem. If you're an avid user of Facebook or Instagram, then you can definitely find yourself comparing your life to your friends, and then you start questioning if you're up to the standard. It starts to affect your self-esteem, right? It actually does affect your self-esteem. But let us say you're a very confident person, then social media will not affect your self-esteem that much. But if you are a very lesser confident individual, then the chances of social media affecting your self-esteem is quite high. So this is the job of a moderating variable. It changes the strength of the relationship. That's how moderators work. Moderator variable does not explain the causal link between IV and DV. This is the job of intervening variables. Okay, just I. IV is for independent variable. So it simply changes the strength or direction of the two.